Number 10. Snake under the bed. A couple in Arizona recently woke up to the shock of a lifetime. When they rolled out of bed, they found that their home had been invaded by a deadly western diamondback rattlesnake. The horrified couple quickly phoned the company Rattlesnake Solutions to come and save them while they escaped from their bedroom and hid outside on the patio. Mitchell Hawkins arrived to catch the snake, not fully aware of just what he was getting into. Mitchell told local news that he thought the couple was maybe freaking out about something simple like a small long-nosed snake or a desert night snake. He didn't expect to find a rattlesnake over 5 feet long curled underneath the couple's bed, just inches away from a pair of flip-flops. Someone had come dangerously close to stepping right in the rattlesnake's striking area. Mitchell opened the door to the bedroom and immediately saw the huge snake. She was pregnant and in a defensive stance. The snake was ready to kill. Luckily for the couple, Mitchell was a real professional. He grabbed his snake tongs, picked the snake up, dropped it in a bucket, and then took it away. The surprising part for Mitchell was that normally only 1 in 400 calls that he receives are actually rattlesnakes. It happens very rarely, and almost always because the rattlesnake slithered in through an open door. Nobody was harmed in this incident, though the couple probably didn't feel super safe in their own home for a very long time. Number 9. Alpaca Invader. A rather unusual intruder invaded a field during a league football match in England. This invader was not nearly as dangerous as the rattlesnake we just talked about. It was actually a little comical. The invader was an alpaca, which somehow wandered onto the football pitch in Wakefield, disrupting the match and causing a whole lot of confusion. The alpaca literally strolled into the middle of the field and then began to chase football players around in the midst of their game. Nobody knew just where exactly the alpaca came from, and the game had to be paused until the excited animal could get figured out. According to the town AFC chairman, the alpaca jumped over the fence of a nearby farm and just kind of made its way onto the football field. After about 20 minutes, the farmer arrived with some food to lure the escaped alpaca back to the farm. Footage was taken of the incident and uploaded online, of course, and it has since been viewed nearly 1 million times. And no, the alpaca didn't manage to injure anybody in all the excitement. Perhaps it was just a fan of the beautiful game. Number 8. Disgusting flatworms. There's a secret invader spreading across the world, and it's quite disgusting. In the United Kingdom, a weird flatworm from New Zealand has come to ravage the landscape. While in the United States, invasive hammerhead flatworms have been spreading from the south and to the north so far as Canada. These worms are actually from New Guinea, thousands of miles across the ocean. In recent decades, France has found themselves being invaded by a terrestrial breed of flatworm that some experts are saying pose a greater threat to European soil than any other invasive species. There have been over 1,000 civilian reports in France of the invasive land flatworms. The most prevalent worm found in France didn't even have a name until it was fully described by scientists in 2016. Researchers in both Brazil and Spain named it the Obama Nangara. The worm can currently be found just about everywhere in the country. It originated in Argentina and hitchhiked to France, probably in ships or in the soil of potted plants. These flat, soft-bodied soil worms would go unnoticed in garden centers around the country, eventually being distributed by enough garden enthusiasts to actually invade native soil and move into nearby farmlands. The reason these worms are so scary is they have no natural enemies in Europe. They're also small and inconspicuous, and they breed quickly by making cocoons filled with gooey worm embryos. The worms eat other worms and even snails, and if gone unchecked, those gross flatworms would eventually kill off a large portion of native critters in France's soil. And while this may not seem like a huge problem, how about you try growing crops and trees without the native bugs in the dirt? Have you ever experienced flatworms in your garden? Let me know in the comments below, and while you're at it, like this video and then hit that subscribe button too. Number 7. Cuban crab invasion. Each spring in Cuba, there's an invasion of biblical proportions. Millions upon millions of small red land crabs explode out of the forests around the Bay of Pigs and go on a breeding frenzy in the nearby sea. This chaotic invasion lasts for weeks and can wreak havoc on human life in the area. Though to be fair, the crabs were there first. Roads become covered with crabs as they flock from the forest to the sea. And because nobody actually cares about the crabs, they just run them over with their cars. The result is thousands of crushed shells all over the road, and a massive increase in business for car repair shops, seeing as all the smashed shells rip apart people's tires. So why Cuba couldn't build some kind of bridge over the area to preserve the life of the crabs is kind of anybody's guess. But one species' loss is kind of another species' gain. Even though humans run over the crabs, all the splattered corpses over the road provide an excellent feast for birds and other hungry critters. Birds love this time of year because they have a free buffet, but the Cubans wouldn't go near the crabs, at least not to eat them. This is because the crabs contain harmful toxins that can be dangerous when eaten by humans. According to PBS Nature, the ancestors of these red crabs evolved around 4 million years ago. They began strictly as sea crabs but evolved to thrive on the moist forest floor. Those red crabs still have gills to breathe with though, so they dig little burrows in the soil to stay moist. When it rains in the spring, they take advantage of the moisture and go on their wild breeding frenzy. Number 6. Monkey abduction. In one of the most shocking animal invasions in recent history, newborn twins in India were apparently killed by a pack of invading monkeys. The monkeys abducted the children from the home they lived in on a Saturday afternoon. They literally broke into somebody's house and stole their babies. One of the babies was found on the roof of the house shortly after and was rescued by neighbors. Unfortunately, the other child was found deceased in a moat. The monkeys had apparently grown tired of the child and threw her into the water to drown. But here's how the event went down in the first place. The home is located near a palace, which happens to be a frequent hangout zone for the monkeys. They got into the house by removing tiles from the ceiling and crawling in like a bunch of burglars. The father of the children was at work and the mother was cooking. Nobody knew what was going on until the monkeys began screeching. When the mother rushed into the room with the children, they were both gone. Number 5. Cat in the ceiling. A tuxedo cat named Piper tried to break into her neighbor's house. She tried to do this by going through the chimney, but the plan backfired on the poor cat and she ended up missing for almost a month. Piper's owner was absolutely horrified, as the cat never went away for more than just a few hours. And after an entire month of not seeing her cat, she was assuming the worst. But according to the report from Fox News, Piper had gotten stuck inside the neighbor's chimney. It was 28 days after Piper vanished that the cat was discovered trapped inside that chimney. This was after about a month of flyers and investigations into the cat's disappearance. And the whole time, this stubborn kitty was literally right next door, stuck because of a botched cat burglary. The neighbors had apparently heard meowing for at least 5 days, but never thought to alert anyone about it. It took these people almost a week to realize that the meowing was coming from inside their own chimney. Piper was rescued soon after, though she was found covered in soot and 7 pounds lighter. She went from a hefty 19 pounds to only 12. And maybe this will become known as the chimney diet. But don't worry, Piper is currently safe and healthy back home. Number 4. Thieving naked mole rats. Naked mole rats are some of the most disgusting invaders in the world. These horrific-looking monsters live in subterranean societies made up of a single pair of mole rat breeders, with the rest being workers. Naked mole rats are one of the only mammals that live like a hive of ants. About 300 of these bald and blind freaks scamper through the tunnels of their colony. But according to Science News, recent research has unveiled that in such huge numbers, sometimes one colony will invade the subterranean lair of another colony to steal their babies and conquer their underground kingdom. Yikes! Recent research published by the Journal of Zoology proved that naked mole rats invade neighboring colonies, sometimes for the express reason of expanding their territory. But they also sometimes abduct baby naked mole rats to swell the ranks of their own army. Basically, naked mole rats operate a lot like Alexander the Great, and you thought only humans went to war. This new information was discovered completely by accident while a research team monitored colonies of naked mole rats in Kenya. They were trying to study the complex social nature of the underground mammals when they discovered how ruthless naked mole rats can be. Number 3. Rats at Target. In Virginia, an invasion of rats closed down the grocery area of a local Target store for over 2 weeks. According to a spokesman for the company, the grocery section would remain closed until Target was confident there were no more rodents scurrying around in their store. What's completely insane about this is that Target allowed the rest of their store to remain open even though they were under siege by disease-ridden rats. The grocery section may have been off limits, but that probably didn't stop the rats from leaving droppings and other gross leftovers all around the store. From what we understand, the rats discovered here are known as roof rats or black rats. They're a special type of rat which dwell in higher places like ceilings, and they're normally close to a food source. There were some rumors that the rats had moved into Target to escape a condemned Quality Inn on the other side of the street, though the city manager said there was no evidence of that. To be quite honest, nobody had any idea where the little rodents came from, but it's a disturbing and gross invasion nonetheless. Number 2. Marauding pigs. Did you know that there has been a pig invasion going on for decades? Today, wild swine are rampaging in almost every single state in the US. They might be a little more prolific in Texas, but those rampaging pigs have been found as far north as Canada and as far south as Mexico. Right now, they're concentrated in the southeastern states, wreaking havoc on everything in sight. And according to Science News, the wild pigs are also becoming an issue for the United Kingdom, Australia, and Germany too. But why are invading pigs such a huge problem? The answer is that wild pigs cause an estimated $1.5 billion in damage every year in the U.S. This is mostly with crops, says the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Wild pigs also carry no less than 30 diseases and almost 40 parasites, many of which are able to travel to other animals and create awful diseases that humans eventually get when they eat the meat. The pigs are also violent and dangerous. When cornered, a wild pig can easily kill a full-grown man by goring him with his horns. Wild pigs are native to Europe, North Africa, and Asia, and they were brought to North America by Spanish settlers in the 16th century. Since then, they've grown out of control. In the first week following the opening of the fastest highway in the United States, 3 cars hit pigs. And in 1988, an F-16 fighter jet ran into some feral pigs while cruising down the runway, completely destroying the jet. These pigs are dangerous and destructive. Number 1. Beavers invade the attic. Beavers have invaded the Arctic, and believe it or not, experts fear that because these furry and incredibly adorable giant rat monsters have been building dams in the Arctic, they've thereby been contributing to faster loss of permafrost. They're inadvertently adding more greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. As if us humans weren't doing enough to make the world hotter, apparently, an invasion of beavers in the Arctic is pushing things along even quicker. Research has shown that the temperatures in the region have warmed as a direct result of the explosion in the local beaver population that began 2 decades ago. Near the town of Kotzebue, beaver dams rose in number from just 2 in 2002 to 98 by 2019. That's a massive increase. The area of surface water, which is a direct sign of melting permafrost, rose during the same time by 8%, and 2/3 of that can be blamed on the beavers. Basically, because beavers are building dams and creating their own artificial lakes, the Arctic permafrost is melting more rapidly and releasing ancient stores of methane, carbon dioxide, and additional greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. And this makes beavers some of the worst animals for contributing to climate change. In Tutsville, Florida, one early Friday morning, a grandmother opened her blinds expecting to see her fluffy cat lounging on the back porch. What this grandmother saw instead was a nude man exposing himself directly to her. She was understandably shocked and appalled. According to the grandmother herself, she opened up the blinds and said, "What the hell? That's not my cat." Little did this pervert know that he had messed with the wrong old lady. Penelope Peterson had worked in security and law enforcement before, and she was not scared of this guy. Instead, she popped out her teeth and growled at the man, frightening him off her porch. Grandma then called the police and they arrested the suspect, who later appeared in court on charges of both burglary and exposing himself. In front of the judge, 28-year-old Axel Rivera wore a jail outfit and some flip-flops, which was far more than he showed to poor Penelope Peterson on her porch at 2 o'clock in the morning. Number 9. The Florida Joker. The Joker, Batman's arch-nemesis, is real, and he's been chilling in Florida. The man is actually nicknamed the Joker because he has tattoos all over his face that make him look just like the comic book character. His look is very similar to that of Jared Leto's Joker in Suicide Squad. He even has tattoos on each of his cheeks that make him look like his mouth has been split from ear to ear and then stitched back up, just like the Joker that Heath Ledger portrayed in The Dark Knight. Ha 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 is tattooed below his eye, just like the character's signature. And Joker, the word, is scribbled on his forehead right next to his Batman logo tattoo with the word F Batman on the wings, with a dagger piercing the bat's heart. He also had his hair dyed green just like the villain. Let's just say this guy is really committed to the role. Well, this wannabe Joker was in the Florida news recently for being charged with possession of illegal substances. This isn't a huge crime, but he was arrested a second time just over a week later for pointing a gun at passing cars while basically standing in the middle of the street, acting an awful lot like his alter ego. When an officer arrived on the scene, he spotted Lawrence Sullivan and immediately recognized that guy. After all, he's kind of hard to miss. The officer questioned Sullivan and gave him a pat-down, at which point he discovered a Smith & Wesson .380 in his pocket. He was then arrested for carrying a concealed weapon. Sullivan himself said he wasn't waving his gun around, but he had definitely had one in his pocket because he wanted to feel safe. Sullivan also said that once he got inside jail, he was treated like a celebrity because of his ridiculous face tattoos. But Sullivan didn't actually spend too much time in general population. He was taken into the psychiatric unit, as is fitting for someone who wants to be the Joker. Oh, and if that wasn't enough, he also has the tattoos 666 and an upside-down cross in front of one of his ears. His family said in a statement that Sullivan just recently inked his entire face as a way to express himself. His mother stood up for him by saying he's a good kid. You know, he has a lot of tattoos, but he's a nice kid with some problems. He's mentally disabled and is handicapped. Number 8. The no-armed stabber. A homeless man in South Florida with no arms was recently charged with stabbing a tourist from Chicago. According to the Miami Beach police, 46-year-old Jonathan Crenshaw held a pair of scissors between his feet and used them to stab Cesar Coronado sometime around midnight early on a Tuesday. Crenshaw was lying face down when the Chicago tourist walked up and for absolutely no reason punched him in the head. Crenshaw managed to get the scissors between his feet and stabbed his attacker, at which point he fled. But this wasn't the story given by the tourist. A friend who was traveling with the stabbing victim claimed that they asked Crenshaw for directions when he flipped out and stabbed Coronado in the arm, forcing him to go to the hospital. Luckily, it's pretty hard to kill someone with a pair of scissors between your feet, and Coronado made a full recovery. Crenshaw was arrested and charged with aggravated battery. His motive for stabbing the poor guy is still unknown, but it's just one of those things that kind of just happen in Florida. Number 7. Mastermind counterfeiter. A man in Florida was arrested for counterfeiting United States currency and trying to sell the bills on Facebook. According to the arrest affidavit, a deputy investigated the case at the home of Levy Newberry following a complaint from his landlord. The landlord claimed that Newberry tried to pay her rent in counterfeit $5, $10, and $20 bills that he had printed out at the library. This guy was not exactly your criminal genius. The landlord told the police that Newberry had pages of printed counterfeit money all over the floor of his bedroom. When the deputy arrived at his home, the jig was up. Newberry told the officer that he was simply printing pictures of money that he had taken from Pinterest at the Newport Richey Public Library. Unfortunately for this criminal mastermind, he was already on probation for dealing stolen property. The officer informed Newberry that what he was doing was most certainly illegal. Even though Newberry dumped his obviously fake money in a sewer drain before the officer could ask him questions, he got arrested anyway and taken to the Land O'Lakes Detention Center. But he did claim that he had found a buyer on Facebook willing to pay him $250 for $500 in fake money. I mean, you really can't argue with that, can you? I mean, you kinda can. Let me know your thoughts and what you would have said to this guy if you were the landlord in the comments below. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button too. Number 6, Monkey Mondays. A restaurant in Florida thought it would be a great idea to start something called Monkey Mondays. Monkey Monday was a day of the week in which the restaurant allowed people to bring in their pet monkeys. It all started when a local couple brought their own monkeys with them to the restaurant to eat on the patio, and it was a huge hit. Everyone loved Monkey Mondays. That is, until a child got bit and Monkey Mondays got shut down immediately. This happened at Carrabba's Italian Grill in Stewart. The boy who got bit tried to grab hold of a 9-month-old capuchin monkey named Jojo. Well, Jojo didn't like being grabbed, and it bit the kid on his pinky, and the little boy had to go to the hospital. According to Fox News, the couple had previously warned the child's father not to touch the monkey. Like, obviously, don't touch the monkey. But of course, the child touched the monkey anyways, and he got bit, and he'll forever be known as the kid that totally ruined Monkey Mondays for the rest of us. Number 5, blind minion attacked. A man has been arrested after one of the most brutal attacks ever on a person in a costume. And of course, this happened in broad daylight in Florida. It happened when a man attacked a blind and mentally handicapped person dressed in a minion costume for absolutely no reason. Jamie Rome was the man in the costume. He was dressed up like a little yellow minion from the Despicable Me franchise on the boardwalk of Daytona Beach to promote the local store where he worked. Jamie was approached by a group of people who lifted him up and dropped him onto the pavement. The entire assault was captured on a surveillance camera. When Jamie tried to stand, a man later identified as Ryan Neihart then punched him back to the ground. Jamie was screaming for help and the other people on the boardwalk simply watched it happen. He wasn't saved until his coworkers heard his desperate screams and ran out of the shop to beat away his attackers. The police eventually arrived and arrested the assailant, and Jamie was back at work in the Minion costume the next day, a little shaken but in good spirits. Jamie loves to wear that costume. He refers to it as his happy place because when he wears it, no one can tell he's blind or disabled. What a sweet guy. Number 4, stupid car thief. Florida is the home of the stupidest car thief in history. Fort Pierce officer Robbie Troutman was sitting in his patrol car at 5 o'clock in the morning with the engine running. Everything was completely normal until he heard his door handle click. Someone was trying to break into his police car while he sat in the front seat. And in case you're wondering, this was not an unmarked cruiser. This was a real police car sitting in front of the real police station. And there was an officer in the front seat, for crying out loud. And in case you've been living under a rock, a lot of police officers work at a police station. And nonetheless, the worst car thief ever tried to open up the door. Suffice it to say, he didn't get away with the car. The officer got out to investigate. The car thief ran and hid behind another vehicle, but he was quickly captured. The man was later charged with attempted grand theft auto of a motor vehicle, along with loitering and prowling. Number 3, drug peddling drive-thru. 2 people were running their very own drug business out of their Florida mobile home. These clever entrepreneurs thought it would be a bright idea to install a drive-thru window on their mobile home to sell drugs quicker, without people getting out of their cars. They even had a sign with an arrow pointing at the window and a clock that let people know when they would be back if they were going out. As you can imagine, this bright Florida idea didn't go over very well in the end. Police quickly got wind of the drive-thru drug shop and decided to put it out of business. Mackenzie Dobbs and William Parrish Jr. have since been arrested and are facing multiple charges related to the sale of fentanyl, one of the worst, strongest, and deadliest opioid painkillers on the market. The couple had been peddling the deadly substance through their kitchen window without ever even leaving their house. Number 2, do not resuscitate. At a Florida hospital, a patient arrived with the strangest tattoo hospital workers had ever seen. This man was admitted unconscious and had a history of health problems. He also had a very high blood alcohol level and no identification or family members present. On his chest was a tattoo that said, "Do not resuscitate." The staff at the hospital were in kind of a conundrum. The patient was 70 years old, and he had an explicit denial of any life-saving treatments inked onto his skin. The doctors attending the man first didn't want to honor the tattoo because it seemed like the right thing to do. After all, if a dying person comes into the hospital, the right thing to do is usually to save them. But then things got really complicated. The hospital's ethics consultant got involved and gave the explicit order not to save the man's life. Do not resuscitate orders are wildly complex, and if one is clearly tattooed on someone's chest, I guess it must be respected. But at the same time, tattoos are in absolutely no way legally binding. In the end, all of the confusion resulted in the man dying. A do not resuscitate order was issued and the patient died right there in the hospital. So what do you think of this one? Number 1, an angry leopard. A man in Florida paid for a full contact experience with a rare black leopard. He paid $150 to play with this big cat. However, the cat clearly wasn't involved in the decision-making and mauled the man instead. Dwight Turner was expecting to rub the cat's belly and take some pictures, but when he entered the backyard enclosure, that giant cat just attacked him. Are you surprised? I mean, he was. According to Global News, the leopard went straight for his jugular and even tried to crush the man's head inside of its mouth. The big cat ripped off part of Dwight's scalp and tore his ear in half. Dwight spent the next week in a hospital and had to get several different surgeries before he fully recovered from the attack. And then, in a completely obscene move, Dwight turned around and tried to sue the private animal sanctuary for putting his life in danger. Talk about not taking responsibility for your own actions. Let's be honest here, if you enter a cage with a wild animal, anything that happens next is entirely your fault. Megan Bishop was driving her 4-year-old son Taylor along Southwest 72 Avenue in Pembroke Pines when a plane suddenly dropped out of the sky and crashed directly into her. This woman had the worst luck imaginable. Out of all the cars the plane could have crashed into, and out of all the empty space on the road, it smacked right into her SUV. The crash killed 3 people, including Miss Bishop's toddler son. Amazingly, the incident was captured on a doorbell camera, showing the exact moment that the plane nosedived into her vehicle and exploded into a ball of flame. Apparently, the aircraft was forced to turn away from North Perry Airport after takeoff, somewhere around 3 p.m., after it suffered engine failure. The engine failed and the aircraft hit a power line and it fell before it ever reached the runway. The 2 people inside the plane never had their identities released to the public, though we know they were pronounced dead at the scene. The only survivor of the incident was Miss Bishop, a teacher's assistant at a local elementary school near the site of the crash. A local resident who witnessed the crash said it sounded like a bomb went off. She called 911 for help, claiming she had never seen anything like it in all of her life. The car literally looked like it had been smashed in half. It's a wonder that Megan survived at all, though she's undoubtedly devastated to this day about the loss of her child. Number 9. The Skny Leave Air Show Disaster. The deadliest air show in history was on July 27, 2002. It started as a fun day with a lot of excitement at the Skny Leave airfield in the Ukraine. But it turned to disaster when a Ukrainian Air Force Su-27 flanker crashed during its routine. As a result of the crash, 77 people were killed and 554 innocent people were injured, with at least 100 of them being hospitalized. The 2 pilots both managed to eject before the crash, and they both landed safely on the ground. But here's how it happened. The aircraft performed a split S maneuver at low altitude and descended rapidly. Everything was fine until the plane's left wing hit a tree, and that caused the plane to lose control, hit the asphalt, and drag 4 rows of barbed wire fencing through terrified onlookers. Not only did the aircraft plow into the crowd, but it dragged a wall of barbed wire over them too. As if the airplane wasn't terrifying enough, the plane only stopped after it hit a stationary aircraft and exploded, then cartwheeled into another section of the crowd. It was an absolute disaster and over 600 people were affected. But what caused such experienced pilots to make such a grave error? After the disaster, the pilots claimed that the airbase map that they'd been given for the air show was not correct to the factual layout of the airfield. They had also not been given an extra rehearsal flight before the show to practice. Of course, this was just the pilot's excuse, as one of the main factors that contributed to the accident was that they performed difficult maneuvers that had not ever been tried before, and this resulted in the most casualties at an airshow disaster in history. Number 8. The wrong throttle. In 2015, Trans-Asia Airway Flight GE235 crashed in Taiwan and killed 43 people on board. The last words uttered by the captain of the flight were, "Wow, pulled back the wrong side throttle." Just seconds after these words were spoken, the plane went sideways, the wing clipped a busy bridge, and the plane plunged into a Taiwanese river, killing a shocking number of people. According to a report from Taiwan's Aviation Safety Council, the crash happened because the captain of the aircraft mistakenly switched the plane's working engine off after the other engine lost power. He basically shut the plane off by accident, causing it to completely lose power. This was an ATR 72-600 turboprop aircraft. The plane is designed to work with only one engine, even if the other one fails. But that's only good if you keep that one engine running. Even more shocking is that CNN reported the captain failed simulator training less than a year before the incident. He'd actually demonstrated a lack of knowledge on how to properly respond to an engine flameout after takeoff. This guy clearly shouldn't have been certified to be flying an aircraft. The plane flew between buildings, nearly smashing into a residential complex, before it hit the bridge and fell straight into the Keelung River near Taiwan's capital of Taipei. Sadly, only 15 out of the 58 passengers on board survived the deadly crash. Number 7. Crashed into the Alps. Germanwings Flight 4U-9525 crashed in 2015, in the same year as the disastrous Taiwanese crash, but this flight crashed into the Alps instead of a river. The flight took off from Barcelona and was on its way to Dusseldorf with 150 people on board on March 24th. It was an Airbus 320 traveling over the sea in the direction of France. It should have been a 2-hour flight. After 30 minutes, the plane reached an altitude of 38,000 feet. It was then that the plane made its final contact with those in air traffic control. The pilot requested permission to continue on his route, which is a routine message for all pilots. Everything seemed perfectly fine. But this is where everything went wrong. At 9:31, the pilot left the cockpit. Seconds later, the target altitude was changed from 30,000 feet to 100 feet and the plane began to descend. 2 minutes later, the plane increased speed. Air traffic control contacted the co-pilot and received no answer. At 9:34, the pilot tried to get back into the cockpit. He'd probably been using the washroom, but the co-pilot wouldn't let him in. At 9:39, people were trying to kick the cockpit door down. At 9:41, the aircraft crashed directly into the French Alps at a speed of about 430 miles per hour. In the shocking audio released from the plane's log, passengers could be heard screaming frantically. The entire time the plane descended, the co-pilot remained silent, but his steady breathing could be heard. And everyone on board died instantly. Do you have a fear of flying? Plenty of people do. Does hearing this story give you some more fear? Tell me your thoughts in the comments section below. Then remember to subscribe to World List for more intense videos. Number 6. Missing in the Yukon. In 1950, an airplane carrying 44 passengers vanished in Canada's Yukon Territory and has never been found. It happened on January 26th, in the middle of a freezing cold winter. The plane departed from an airfield outside Anchorage, Alaska. Everyone on the aircraft was a member of the military, and it seemed like a routine trip. They were going from the military base in Alaska to Great Falls, Montana, but they never made it. 2 hours after takeoff, the radio operator of the aircraft confirmed that they were passing over a small gold rush settlement near the Yukon's White River. This was one of the many radio checkpoints, as the pilot was required to check in every 30 minutes because of how dangerous of a journey this was. There was no check-in after this. The aircraft just vanished. There was a scramble of about 98 planes and 7,000 people sent to search for the crash, and 70 years later it still hasn't been found. Nobody knows what happened in the aircraft or where it went, though some theories claim it hit the top of a mountain and it was buried in snow or sank in a frozen lake. All 44 passengers and crew were declared missing and probably dead. Number 5. Crashed at home. A man in Utah recently flew a small aircraft into his own house several hours after he was arrested for beating up his wife. This is definitely the weirdest case of airplanes gone wrong, as it's as sad as it is bizarre. The crash occurred at about 2:30 a.m. in Payson, a tiny town with only 20,000 residents, 60 miles from Salt Lake City. But his arrest came earlier in the evening at about 7:30. Witnesses called the police because they could literally see Dwayne Ute assaulting his wife. The couple had been drinking and apparently wandered over to American Fork Canyon to talk about their problems. The talking didn't go very well. Dwayne was booked on suspicion of domestic violence and bailed out later that same evening. He went back to his home, picked up his truck and some belongings, and then he left. About 2 hours later, Dwayne crashed an airplane that police say belonged to his employer directly into his house, with his wife and a small child in the home. Shocking, no? He was so angry at his wife that he flew an airplane into their house to try and take her out. Fortunately, his wife and the child escaped and survived, and Dwayne did not. He went down with the airplane and exploded in a ball of fire. Nobody's really sure what this guy's plan was or what he was thinking, but it's safe to say that whatever his ultimate goal was, he didn't achieve it. Number 4. Aid gone wrong. A United Nations Dash 8 cargo airplane full of aid packages recently crashed in Somalia. The airplane veered off the runway before takeoff, plunged into the dirt, and was engulfed in flame. This airplane didn't even make it into the sky. The 3 crew members on board escaped with only minor injuries and nobody was killed. But the rescue mission was a great big failure. The aircraft was being operated by Bluebird Aviation, a small airline based out of Nairobi in Kenya. It had been carrying aid supplies meant to help flood victims, but unfortunately they never got their help. But wait until you hear why the plane veered off the runway in the first place. According to what Bluebird Aviation reported, the plane veered off the runway when a donkey walked out in front of it. It was a huge debacle. The landing gear collapsed and the wing broke apart from the airplane and it nosedived into the ground, all because of some random donkey. Talk about lack of airport security. You wouldn't ever see that happening at a major international airport, but apparently in Somalia it can happen. Number 3. The Empire State Building crash. On July 28, 1945, a freak accident involving an airplane in the Empire State Building killed 14 people. A lot of Americans don't actually know the Empire State Building was one of the first major disasters in New York City involving a plane. It happened because of heavy fog. A B-25 Mitchell bomber was flying from Massachusetts to LaGuardia Airport. When it entered New York City, the pilots couldn't see because the fog was so thick. The air traffic controllers instructed the pilots to divert to Newark Airport instead, so the pilots took the plane over Manhattan. At this time, the Empire State Building was the tallest structure in the city, while the bomber was flying low and had very poor visibility. It nearly crashed into the Chrysler Building in Midtown and had to swerve to avoid it. But when the plane swerved, it smashed straight into the Empire State Building near the 79th floor. Upon impact, fuel exploded and filled the interior of the Empire State Building with flames that trickled down to the 75th floor. One of the engines from the airplane even went straight through the building and landed inside a penthouse apartment on the other side of the street. And of course, there was a hailstorm of airplane parts dropping onto the nearby buildings below. This was as big of a disaster as it gets. The other engine hit an elevator cable and caused it to snap. The woman inside the elevator car almost plunged to her death, saved at the last minute by the emergency brakes. In the end, 11 people inside the building were killed, with many more suffering from burns caused by the fiery fuel. Some were even thrown out of the building to their death. Number 2. The D.B. Cooper hijacking. One of the most notorious airplane hijackings in history didn't involve a single death. This is the story of D.B. Cooper, who on November 24, 1971, bought a one-way ticket on Flight 305 from Portland to Seattle. He went by the name Dan, a nondescript man in his mid-40s dressed in a business suit and a black tie. After the plane took off, Dan handed the stewardess a note stating he had a bomb in his suitcase, and he wanted her to sit down with him. According to official FBI records, the stewardess did as she was told, and Dan opened his suitcase to show her the bomb inside. Dan then instructed the stewardess to deliver a note to the captain, stating that Dan wanted 4 parachutes and $200,000 in cash. Keep in mind that this was the early 70s when you could literally just walk onto an airplane with a bomb. There was no TSA providing security, no metal detectors or X-ray machines. The plane did land in Seattle. The passengers got off. Then the money and the parachutes were brought on board. Dan instructed the pilot to fly to Mexico City. But somewhere between Seattle and Reno, the hijacker jumped out of the plane with one of the parachutes and his ransom money. And nobody knows where he went. He was responsible for the most successful plane heist in history, all these years later, and he still hasn't been found. The FBI still don't even know his real name or what happened to the money. Number 1. Gender reveal plane crash. Happiness turned to horror in Cancun when an excited family watched their risky gender reveal stunt end in a disastrous plane crash. Apparently, the pilot and co-pilot of the craft were killed in a violent collision after the plane smashed into open water. But it all began with the gender of a baby. The expecting parents hired the plane for the gender reveal stunt and were watching from a boat in the Nidchept Lagoon. The airplane flew overhead with a banner announcing the child's gender. As it turned out, the baby was going to be a girl. But the fun ended here. The plane flew over the boat and nosedived straight into the ocean. Mexican officials arrived on the scene and recovered 2 bodies from the water. But what's really strange is that nobody has been able to determine what caused the crash. The plane was only trailing a banner behind it with the gender of the baby. It wasn't loaded with dyed water or pink smoke. It literally just fell out of the sky for no obvious reason. Nobody knows what happened. Andrea Norton was a 20-year-old college student from Hot Springs, North Dakota. She was a junior studying environmental science, and she went on a class trip to the Ozarks with her fellow students from Briarcliff University. Together, they embarked on a journey to Arkansas's Ozark National Forest. It was Sunday morning, and everyone was in pretty good spirits. They were having fun, enjoying each other's company, and taking in the fresh air and the beautiful views all around them. Andrea decided she needed a selfie to memorialize the trip. She noticed a cliff that would have been a perfect place to take a selfie with all the trees and mountainous landscapes in the background, except it turned out to be a lot less than perfect. She stood at the edge of the cliff, posed for her selfie, and then tumbled 100 feet to her death. According to eyewitnesses, Andrea had repositioned herself to get precariously close to the edge just before she lost her footing and plummeted to the hard ground below. This is being called one of the most tragic selfie-related deaths in history, as the young girl was only 20 years old and on her way to a life of success and happiness. And yet one wrong foot and a blind desire to capture a dramatic photo resulted in her demise and an endless mourning for her family. The only consolation, if you can even call it that, is that Andrea died instantly upon hitting the ground. Number 9. Buried alive. In an attempt to take the ultimate selfie, a Romanian teenager has died. Anna Ursa was 18 years old when she posed with a friend on the top of a train in the Romanian city of Iasa. Everything was fine until Anna accidentally touched a live wire with her leg, sending 27,000 volts of electricity coursing through her body. The force of the current was so strong that her friend was blown off the train. He survived, but Anna did not. Just minutes earlier, a passerby had warned the teenagers to keep their heads down and that they should be careful to avoid the electric cables, and the warning was ignored. This same passerby then heard a bang like an explosion as Anna ignited in flames. The teenager was burned alive on the roof of that train, suffering burns across 50% of her body. But what's truly disturbing about this story is that Anna's friend told investigators while recovering in the St. Maria Hospital that they'd been trying to take the ultimate selfie, and that they hadn't even realized the dangers. Anna's surviving friend will probably never take another selfie again for as long as they live. Number 8, taking the plunge. A Brazilian man recently took the plunge of a lifetime after trying to take a selfie at the edge of a waterfall. Guilherme Chiapetti was only 22 years old when he plunged 32 feet down the face of a waterfall and landed at the rocks at Cachoeira de Onca in South Brazil. According to local media, the man suffered traumatic brain injuries and died shortly after in the hospital. Chiapetti was no stranger to the waterfall. In fact, his father told local media that his son actually frequented the place, often partaking in photography sessions with his friends. But this would be a photo session like no other. He was standing so close to the edge of the waterfall, even this experienced man was helpless as his foot slipped on the wet rock and he tumbled all the way down. It might be important to note that this was not a free-falling waterfall cascading into an empty pool. It was a gentle waterfall spilling down craggy rocks to hard stones below. Number 7, smiling death. In China, an onset of sudden fog was responsible for a horrifying accident on the Anhui Expressway that resulted in 18 people being killed and 21 others being injured. At least 30 vehicles were involved in this devastating pileup. And while the accident itself was dramatic and horrific, one reporter treated it a bit too lightly. This reporter took a happy selfie smiling and holding up fingers in the peace symbol in front of the burned-out cars where people died, resulting in significant backlash on social media. People from the local area were particularly angry at the reporter's blatant lack of respect. One of the locals reposted her picture with the caption, "At 7:45 in the morning on the 15th, 30 vehicles collided, leaving 18 people dead and 21 wounded." Yet this Fuyang radio presenter poses at the scene of the crash with a man in uniform grinning from ear to ear. Don't you have a conscience? Don't you have any personal integrity in your work? But what made this incident even worse is that she actually held up her employee badge for the selfie, giving herself away. She worked for the Fuyang Yingxiang traffic radio as a presenter, though it's doubtful she'll have her job for much longer after this little stunt. This is not the first time a smiling photo at the scene of a serious accident went viral either. A local Shan KC official made headlines in 2012 when he was photographed laughing at the scene of a traffic collision that left 36 people dead. The photo of the smiling official instigated a search with people online exploring his background and identity. He was eventually exposed as a corrupt official. Not only can taking selfies in the wrong place wind up killing you, but taking selfies in inappropriate situations can turn you into the most hated person in the country. And that's exactly what happened with this disrespectful reporter. What do you think of these people that took selfies in the wrong place at the wrong time? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Number 6, selfie on the tracks. A 25-year-old man in India named T. Siva wanted to take a selfie with a train. His plan was to take the selfie as the train was speeding by, catching a magical moment to put on his social media profiles. But he stood a little too close to the tracks. Even though the railway staff warned him about taking pictures with the trains, he went ahead and did it anyways. Worst part about the whole thing is that he even succeeded in getting the selfie. The selfie shows the man pointing at the train that's coming towards him. What the selfie doesn't show is what happened after, when the train smacked him in the head and knocked him over. Miraculously, he walked away with nothing but a minor head injury and he's still alive today. A release statement said that taking selfies or any other photography by trespassing onto railway tracks calls for punishment under the Railway Act. Number 5, selfie plummet. It turns out that India is actually the home of selfie deaths. There's no other place in the world where so many people, specifically young people, are getting injured or dying from taking reckless selfies. Maybe it's the population, or maybe it's a secret obsession that's showing off on social media. Whatever the case, yet another youth has come close to death while trying to take a dramatic selfie. This time, the victim plunged over 150 feet down the side of a rock cliff while trying to take a selfie with a waterfall. He slipped at the exact moment that he clicked the picture button, right before he tumbled down the rocks. What's truly horrifying is that this tumble down the cliff was captured on video by others who had stopped to film the scenery of the waterfall. What they hadn't expected was to get a free video of a selfie gone wrong. After the young guy hit the ground, paramedics were called and he was sent to the hospital, where last we heard, he was fighting for his life. Number 4. Selfie pusher. In a shocking twist, a man taking a selfie in India accidentally knocked somebody else into a raging river, causing her to die. Not only are people accidentally dying from taking selfies, but now they're killing others. The tragic incident went down on January 3rd. Nirupama Prajapti was trying to take a selfie of himself at the edge of an angry river when a stumbling man, trying to do the same thing, lost his footing and knocked the girl over the edge. Witnesses reported that they could hear the girl screaming as she plunged into the roaring waters below. The poor girl vanished beneath the gushing foam and her body wasn't found until 22 hours later, when rescue workers pulled it out of a crevice 1,500 feet farther down the river. As far as we know, there's been no legal action taken against the man who pushed the girl to his death. It was obviously an accident, but it was still his fault. Maybe next time he'll look twice before shoving into a crowd with his phone in the air. Number 3. Killed by a wave. Yet another tourist has lost their life in Bali. There's a place called the Devil's Tear Cove on Nusa Lembongan Island. The area is known for its gorgeous cliffside coastline, but it's also extremely dangerous. The waves here are deadly and have been known to swipe tourists off the sides of cliffs and whisk them away to watery graves. And that's exactly what happened to this 22-year-old tourist from China as she was trying to take a selfie. She was standing at the edge of the cliff, posing to take her picture with the raging waters below. What she hadn't expected to happen was for a giant wave to rear out of the ocean and grab hold of her like a great watery fist. The wave was so powerful that it knocked her into the water and swept her away. By the time a boat finally reached her body, the woman was dead. But this could have been avoided. The local government here is aware of just how dangerous the powerful waves are to foolish tourists who are normally half drunk and stumbling across the rocks to take pictures. It's why they put up a fence around the area to protect everyone. But this Chinese woman, just like so many other tourists, climbed over the fence to get that perfect selfie. Her perfect selfie resulted in the 5 worst minutes of her life as she drowned. Number 2. Electrocuted. A 13-year-old boy in India has been electrocuted to death after trying to take a selfie on top of a train. But this story has a bit more juice to it. The young boy was accompanied by 2 of his friends, and they arrived at their local COVID isolation coach to play around and take selfies. While the boy climbed on top of the train, his 2 friends waited for their turn. That was when the boy touched a high-voltage wire and was zapped and sent flying right off the train. His 2 friends tried to rescue him, but it was too late. He succumbed to his injuries. The shock from the voltage was so electrifying that it even caught one of the coaches on fire. The train literally burst into flames and fire rescue personnel had to hurry to put it out. To make matters even worse, the boys were trying to take their selfie on the COVID isolation train that had been set up to isolate COVID-19 patients in the region. Rather than stressing out about the pandemic, the kids decided to mess around as kids will do, and it cost one of them his life. Number 1. Selfie survivor. This last story also involves an accident with a train, so if there's one takeaway from this particular video, it's don't mess around on top of trains, on train tracks, or just around trains at all. It's extremely dangerous, and the selfies are definitely not worth it. 4 girls in Indonesia were goofing around at the train station in the city of Purworejo in Indonesia's central Java province. The friends wanted to get some cute selfies together. Well, according to the New York Post, in their excitedness to take photos using their selfie stick, one of the girls got a bit too close to the train track and got smashed in the skull by a passing train. But don't worry, she didn't die. She miraculously survived even though her skull was literally cracked open like an egg. The poor girl was only 16 years old, and she just so happened to be at the back of the picture closest to the train tracks. In the end, the teens got their selfie, and the injured girl got a trip to the hospital where she had to have her scalp sewn back together. Even after the rush surgery, she still required additional medical attention to seal her skull back into place. Doctors have yet to report whether the girl is going to suffer any long-term injuries, such as brain damage. Thanks for watching. Do you have any close call ultimate selfies? What's the closest you've ever come to a selfie disaster? Do you think you'll ever risk your life for a picture again? Let me know about it in the comments, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button and come back soon for another wild video. We'll see you next time.